ready.
Okay. Okay.
I'm Sandra Bendayan. I'm interviewing Deborah Pfeffer. We're doing this interview for the Holocaust Oral History Project. Today's the 13th of March, 1996, and John Grant is our producer. Could you please begin, Deborah, by telling us what was your name when you were born, if it wasn't Deborah Pfeffer?
Where I was born in Poland, you know, they gave us names, just Yiddish names. So it was Deborah Pflanzer, I was born. And afterwards, when I went, you know, to the camps, so it was easier to say Deborah than Deborah, because nobody knew how to pronounce it, how to spell it. And that's when I became Deborah.
How do you spell Pflanzer?
In Poland, it was spelled F-L-A-N-C-E-R, Pflanzer.
And where and when were you born?
I was born in Kazimierz, Kuzmir, Poland, January the 5th, 1919. But I was told that it was not this date especially, because then in the old country they didn't register right away, you know, the children who were born. So later on it came out this way or that way. And especially my birth was very traumatic for my mother. Because when my father died after First World War, my mother was pregnant with me 3 months. And she had 5 older children. She became a widow without means of support. And this was especially when I was born. That's what my mother told me, I don't remember it, that I was still born. And the people there around who were there, the neighbors who were attending, said, just leave it alone. She has enough mouths to feed. But my mother said, no, just try to do whatever you can, and they revived me. So she had 1 more mouth to feed.
You had 5 older brothers and sisters, huh?
Yes. The oldest one was 13, and there was an accident. And she drowned. At the same time, 100 other Jewish people, children, they drowned in the same accident, because my hometown is on the bank of the Vistula. And from the other side of the Vistula, they had some work to do for the Germans. This was still in World War I. And when they were having barges and and taking the people across the river, and there were not too many people who were, you know, doing the how do you call it, the work that the barge would go, you know. And one barge was tied to the other one, and one barge started to list, and people were jumping from one barge to the other, and that's when everybody drowned. So my oldest sister, she was then one of the victims.
What was her name?
Her name was Hinda.
So did she die before you were born?
Wait a minute. Yes, yes. Because I was born after World War One, and she died during the World War One.
Did that mean that there were now only 4 older children?
Yes.
And what were their names?
Now, the oldest was Leanne, then was Rachel, and then was Ephraim. Oh, there were 5. And then was Hannah, and I was the youngest.
Okay.
5.
Leon, Rachel, Ephraim, Hannah, and you. That's 5.
5.
And there had been 6 children.
Yes.
And what were your parents' names?
My father's name was Yechiel, and my mother's name, Chaya.
And how was your family supported? Did your father have certain
Oh,
crafty
my
labor?
father was a scholar. He was a scribe in Hebrew, and he made a pretty good living until the First World War broke out. And he had smiches, if you know what it means. He finished rabbinical school. He could have been a rabbi. But when the war broke out, the First World War, and he had to make a living for his family, so he started business. And he was buying and selling wheat, grain. And he made a pretty good living until the Germans came and they took over my hometown. So my mother stayed in my hometown. He went to Warsaw and to try to make a living there and to send back. It was going back and forth. But then he got sick, and whatever there was, went to the doctors, and this everything. And when he died, my mother was penniless.
He died of that sickness?
Yeah. Wait a minute, this was then the flu, the influenza. So that's when he died. My mother's 2 brothers died, and my mother's 2 brothers, yeah, and him died from the influenza. It was in 1980.
How did your mother manage after that?
Very, very hard. I can't remember when I was young, but she must have managed because we grew up. Later on, the older children went, to seek for jobs to make a living. So they went by the way of friends. And that's when they stayed there, they got the jobs. And this I remember, that every 2 weeks came a check from them to support us. Until the Second World War broke out.
Did you have any grandparents in your town? No.
No, they died all before. My mother's mother died when she was 8 years old. And there were brothers. She was the only girl. And I remember she told me how she couldn't reach the stove. So she had to put a footstool to reach the stove. She was the only girl. And a lot of more stories what she told me about her childhood. And then afterwards,
Did your mother have to work while you were growing up?
oh yes, she was father and mother. You couldn't get a job, you know, there in a small town. So she used to walk 14 kilometers to a larger city and buy some sugar, salt, all these things, and then come back, carry this everything, come back and sell it to the little merchants. That's how she made a living. And the older children, because I can't remember the older children being home. Even this Leon, who was the oldest, he was born in 1905. And his daughter, she is too a survivor. She lives in Israel. And she asked me, she showed me a picture of two men, which was her father. I couldn't tell. I couldn't really tell who was her father. And I think till now she didn't find out. Because her father there in France, he too perished. Yeah, in Paris. And her sister,
So you were saying the older children at a young age went out and worked and helped support the rest of you.
oh yes, yes, yes. They helped support, and especially what I remember, you know, growing up, that they used to send, like I told you before, every 2 weeks there arrived a check. It wasn't a big amount, but it was enough to keep us, you know, in food at least.
Did you have your own home?
Yes, we had our own home, and that's why my mother lived there. The home was divided. My mother's brother's widow lived in one part, and we lived in the other part.
Growing up, was your native language Yiddish?
My first language was Yiddish, and then it was Polish. When I went to school, so it's not Polish. So we always, at home, we spoke only Yiddish. And Polish was when we spoke with somebody else in school or children. But the native language is Yiddish.
Was there a large Jewish community in this town?
Oh, it was a small town, and it was a resort town. Because I have these pictures. This is from my hometown. And people from all of Poland who used to come for the summer, because it was a very beautiful town, and it was so situated right on the bank of the Vistula, one side, and all around there were hills. And people, even Polish people, built their villas on the slopes of the hills. And during the summer there used to come a lot of people who came to vacation there. So they brought a lot of culture. And they used to come a lot of speakers and all kinds of organizations, Hashomer, you know, Zionist and Bundist, Bund, if you have heard of it, yeah. There are all, many organizations. And the youth used to come together every Friday night, and we used to have discussions. What the world affairs, and then when it broke out, the civil war in Spain, we used to follow it very closely. We couldn't afford to have, you know, everybody should have, you know, a newspaper. So we got a newspaper, we chipped in, and we read the newspaper. And the same thing, there was a library. The same thing was with the library. We couldn't, you had to pay to be a member, to be able to take out books from the library. So we used to get together and chip in and then exchange the books. One read it, and then the other read it, and then the third one, the fourth one. And that's how we managed. And still now I can't, you know, understand. There are so many libraries, and they go begging for people to come and read.
Was your family a Zionist?
Family, I was a Zionist. My brother was more, yes, and my sister Hannah was a Zionist. My brother Ephraim. These three, we grew up, you know, together. The older ones were already away. So he was a Lincoln politician. I don't know if you know what it means. It is the left wing of the Zionists. And he instilled in me the love of books and Yiddish, very much so.
How about your mother? Was she a Zionist?
She didn't have time to be a Zionist or anybody else. When she came home, she was so tired that she, oh yes, she supported, you know, Palestine then and everything. Oh yes, she would have every Friday would have a pushke. And she would put in some money, whatever she could spare. Oh yes, but she couldn't, you know, take part or anything in it.
Was your household Orthodox?
Orthodox, oh yes. I can't think of anybody else who wouldn't have, you know, kosher and everything had to be. I remember one time that it was on a Seder, and my mother prepared the Seder, and my brother was going to read the Haggadah. And he started skipping. So she got so mad at that for skipping, and she said, "Go away, I will do it." And she read the whole Haggadah and did everything, because she was mad at him that he skipped. Oh, she was very, very Orthodox, yeah. I wasn't that Orthodox, and neither were my brothers or sisters, but we took into consideration her feelings, and we never would do anything, you know, that it would be against her feelings. On a Saturday, we wouldn't do anything, you know, which wasn't supposed to be milchig and fleischig, if you know what it means. We always did whatever. One thing what I remember still, it was doing a Seder. And my mother prepared everything and cooked. And after the meal, she fell asleep. And we just didn't think of it, that the dishes have to be washed right away. If not, they will turn chametz. And then she woke up, my goodness, I didn't wash the dishes. So she waited. The next day, right away, she went to the roof and asked him what she should do with the dishes. So he told her to scour them. He knew that he wouldn't have to throw away the dishes or anything.
Why don't we stop here?
Okay, anytime.
With all the difficulties in keeping going when you were young, did you ever feel hungry as you were growing up?
No, not particularly. I wasn't feeling hungry or anything, but I was only one thing, but I wouldn't say jealous, but I felt deprived that I didn't have a father.
Can we hold it?
You had felt deprived about not having a father.
Not having a father. That's what, but so there were a lot of, you know, of my friends who had more things than I could, but I wasn't, you know, deprived, no. My mother did everything what she could to help us out, and as soon as we got older, we started, you know, looking for some ways and means to make a little money, to make it easier. I used to tutor a lot of children. And they used to come to my house, and some who could afford it, so I used to go there to their houses and tutor them. And I was satisfied. I had whatever I needed. I wasn't deprived. Not in my mind. Maybe, you know, in comparison to the standard of living here, so it would have been very, very poor. But then, no, I had a lot of friends, and it was quite all right. We lived with the Polish people in peace, very much so. But then when the World War II broke out, everything changed. Everything changed for the worse. They came, the Polish people showed up themselves as very greedy, jealous of the Jewish people. Yes, it was even before the war broke out that they started the anti-Semitism. They were starting after Pilsudski died. Pilsudski was the marshal. And the others took over the anti-Semite. It was called the party Endeki. And they were, you know, causing ferment between the Polish people, even if they didn't feel like doing it. Don't go by, don't frequent a Jewish store, and don't fraternize with Jews, and you know, all these things. And there was a priest, and he used to cause ferment between the youth, the Polish youth, too. But the worst what we could expect was if somebody would go and throw a rock at you, but not anything worse. But when the war broke out, that was a different story.
Was there any anti-Semitism for you as you were growing up from being small?
Not that we knew that we were Jews. We knew that they were against us, but it wasn't showing too much. One thing in school, there was a teacher. Later he was the head teacher of the school. And I saw him bringing anti-Semitic literature to school and distributing to the Polish children. But it was the literature, the leaflets, but it still wasn't too bad. Then we felt very much, you know, that it was anti-Semitism, but we could live with it.
Do you know about what year that might have been?
Oh yes, this could have been in 36, 37. That's when it started, you know,
But in the 20s, when you were young, you didn't experience this of
in the
children
20s.
throwing rocks at you or calling you names or that sort of thing?
No. Later on, yes. But we used to go out at night and go everywhere and not being afraid of anything.
Did you have Christian friends?
Yes. We have Christian friends. Oh.
Okay.
So you were talking
About the Christian friend. I had a special friend, a Polish girl, and she came from a very liberal family. She too was an orphan. Her mother had to raise, you know, and there were four girls. She was the youngest, and she was very, very nice. She used to come to my house. We didn't go on Saturdays, we didn't go to school, but it was a school day. And we had to make up whatever there was to do. So I used to go to her house, or she would come to my house and tell me what the assignments were. As a matter of fact, only this one proved herself during the war. When there was the ghetto, when they made a ghetto there, and she used to come and bring me some, or milk, or butter, or eggs. They weren't too rich themselves, and she used to do it.
Do you remember her
Auntie.
name?
Chubinska. It's a very hard name, but I am trying to remember her first name. I think Anusha Chubinska. And later on it turned out she married a man, a Polish man, and he had to run for his life. The Germans would have arrested him because he was in the underground, and he went to England then, and she stayed home with her family. But after the war, I don't know what had happened, because I never went back.
I was wondering whether your mother ever thought to remarry.
She had a chance. She had a chance to remarry, and I remember this man used to come, and he was well off, but she said no, because she said, he is too cheap, he is not going to want to support my children. And she didn't want to. She never remarried. She was 35 years old. But this man I remember. He used to come in and he wanted, but she said no. And she did all right.
Do you remember your mother or your friends or your siblings discussing the policies of Hitler after he came to power in the mid-30s?
Oh, yes. Before the war, oh, we did it all the time. All the time. We discussed it, and some were against. I remember one thing what my brother said, my brother Ephraim. He said, Hitler is taking over, this was already during the war, he's taking over so many countries. This is just like if somebody would try to eat and eat and eat and eat, and then he has to throw up. He said, this is what Hitler going to do. But he didn't live to see it.
Were you at all afraid there in your town in Poland at that point when Hitler's policies became known?
When his policies, oh yes, yes, we talked and discussed and what to do, but you can't prepare yourself for anything like this.
Did you ever think of leaving Poland or going to Palestine? I know you were pro-Zionist.
Oh, it was impossible. It was impossible. Then was the quotas. You had to have an affidavit to go. It was almost impossible. For people who had a lot of money, they could bribe themselves out. It was not, you know, and anyways, it was very hard to leave. Then when the war broke out, when we started breaking up everything, you know, my brother was then married, and he went with his wife, and then he had one child, and he went a little bit further, and then he had to come back. There was not too much money to go on, and to buy food, and to buy shelter, and it was very, very hard.
Which brother was this?
Ephraim. We were these three children that I remember, me, Hannah, and Ephraim, who grew up together. I don't remember growing up with the other children, because they were, as far as I remember, they were already gone to France.
So he had to return with his wife and child.
Yes, he had to return it. And then they made the ghetto, and she was then pregnant. These two made them return. And then my sister married into a neighboring town. It was about 25 kilometers from our town. And I stayed with my mother, and I felt I have to stay with my mother. I am the youngest, and I have to stay with her. And they made the ghetto, and we had to leave our home, my mother and I. We couldn't take anything. But it's sticking in my mind too, how the Polish people behaved. They was right there on the street with the horse and wagons, waiting. Couldn't wait long enough that we should step out of the house, that they would come and pounce and take, whatever they could, put it on the wagon and then left. So,
did you recognize any of your Polish neighbors or friends in that
no,
group?
they came mostly from the villages from around. The neighbors, no. The neighbors, they didn't do it.
Do you remember the day that Poland was invaded and the war began?
Oh, it was September the 1st, 1939. I would forget it. Oh, yes.
Can you describe that day for you?
They set up a loudspeaker in the town square, and they were broadcasting that Germany has invaded Poland, and we are very brave, and we are going to fight, all these things, what you have. And this was then, and we were very sad listening to it, went back, and all of a sudden everything turned topsy-turvy. There was, before the war, maybe 2-3 years before, it could have been in 1937, there came a man, and he settled in this small town, a Polish man, and he was very, very poor. He didn't have anything. I remember that he came into my brother Ephraim. He was a tailor, and he worked with another man. His son was married to my sister in Paris, and he worked there. And this Polish man, I can't recall right now the name, but I knew his name. He came, his pants were so worn out, so he came to this tailor to fix his pants. So he was sitting in his underpants, waiting for the pants. He was so poor. It turned out that he was a Volksdeutsche. After the war broke out and the Germans came in, so he turned out to be a big macher. And he was one, I suppose he must have gathered some information about the Jewish stores and who has the money, who has not. He led all the raids on these Jewish stores. My brother knew him because he kept coming with his pants before the war. But afterwards he didn't need him. But one thing that what he did a favor for my brother was then when they started liquidate the ghetto. So my brother and his wife, meanwhile in the ghetto, I am just jumping ahead. My sister-in-law had another boy, and the kids were hungry. They didn't have anything to eat. And somehow the younger boy got hold of something, and it was poison. And the child died from it. So when they started liquidating the ghetto, so he took his wife and this oldest boy, and they went to the bank of the Vistula, and he himself, this Polish man, this Volksdeutsche, I know, you know what a Volksdeutsche is.
Why don't you explain it here, though?
A Volksdeutsche was people who settled in a country, and they said that they come from Germans. But when the war broke out and when the Germans took over, they were the first one to denounce everybody, and they were collaborating with the Germans. And it was they were pride. This was a pride for them. I am a Volksdeutsche. So he was a Volksdeutsche. And he helped my brother get through in a barge through the Vistula. To on the other side, they didn't have a ghetto yet. Meanwhile, my mother and I stayed in the apartment which my brother had, because we had to get out of our apartment, of our house, because it was on the main street. And this was not considered, you know, Jews were not considered to have to live there, to be able to live there, because it was a main street.
So the original house that you owned, you had to move out of?
Not to move out, to flee it.
Flee it?
Flee it. And we went to my brother's, and we lived together. And then when my brother and his wife and child went across the Vistula to Janovce, and they didn't have a ghetto yet, but hers, a cousin lived there. So they thought maybe they will be able to get accommodated there. And meanwhile, my mother and I stayed there in his apartment. My sister, who was married and lived, like I said, about 25 kilometers from us, they didn't have a ghetto. So she came to us, to Kazimierz, that my mother and I would go to her. And she hired a horse and a wagon, and we went there. She was on the verge of giving birth. She was pregnant, but she came. And we went and we lived there. This was in 1940. It was the end of 1940. And we went there to my sister, and we lived there in one room. It was she, her husband, and she gave birth to a boy, her husband's mother, a sister with her husband, and I can't remember how many children, 4 or 5. We all lived in one room.
about 12 of you, it sounds like.
Yes. And this 1940, yes, I said, this was 1940. It was a very cold winter, very cold. And it was very hard to keep, to get something to heat. So one time, my sister's mother-in-law got hold of some coal, and there was such a, I don't know how to say it in English, especially a heating stove. You put the coal underneath, and on top, not on top, in the middle was such a space that you could put to warm water up or to keep warm food. And it had such, you closed a damper. I couldn't think of the word. So she heated the coals, and so that she thought that the heat will escape through the, how do you say it?
You mean the chimney?
Through the chimney, yes. So she closed the damper. We went all to sleep, and all of a sudden the baby started crying. I looked up, and my sister wanted to go to see to the baby, and she fell. So I thought, what's the matter? And I started, my mother and I slept in the same bed, so I started to climb over my mother, and I fell out. So I thought, this is something funny. I crawled to the door and opened up the door, and the snow came in because it was right to the outside. But when I pushed open the door, I fell over the door, and I fell into the snow. But this revived me, and everybody revived with the fresh air. And then it occurred to us that she has closed the damper. Not too many of the people who were there survived. I think I am the only one who survived of this whole
Who
thing.
survived the war, you mean?
Yeah,
But everybody in that room survived that
survived
evening.
that evening, yes. Yes, everybody. I just don't know what it got into me that it could be something, and I opened the door.
So how
And then-
did you figure that out?
I didn't figure it out. It's just like an impulse, I suppose. An impulse.
How big was that room you were all living in?
I would say taking out this, like square, this was the room.
Maybe 20 by 20 or feet? Something like that?
I have no
A
idea.
smallish room for that many people.
Yes, a small room.
Did you have any bathroom, toilet facilities or washing facilities?
Outside.
An outhouse?
Outhouse, yeah.
What about running water?
No, I had to bring it in. Oh no, we didn't have this running water, we didn't have, facilities, oh no.
Your original home that you owned, when you described having to flee, what was the situation? Were there soldiers demanding you to go, or how was it that you had to flee?
The Polish, they came, and they were the Einsatzkommando. These But when the Germans came in, they used to leave a garrison, and they went up. And the garrison was commanding the whatever there was to. Oh yes, they did a lot of things.
For example?
For example, before even we left, you know, so they came in, took whatever they wanted, and consigned especially the youth to go to work, public works. What was the public works? Shoveling snow with the hands, and I'm trying to remember.
It's okay, it might come up later. We were talking before about what happened on the very day that the war was declared.
Yeah.
You said the loudspeakers were there.
Yeah.
And did troops march into your town that day?
No, not right away. But two days after, they bombed the town. And we ran away to a neighboring village. My mother and I and my sister. My brother was with his wife, sister wasn't married yet. And we went to a neighboring village and we slept on the floor. And it was maybe 2-3 days afterwards, and we returned back. But we were there, we ran away, and even Polish people ran away because of the bombs. I remember one young boy was killed then, and a lot were wounded from glass, shattered glass and everything.
But you still had your home there.
Yes.
Could you
Yeah.
describe that home? What was that home like?
How can you describe it? See here, This-
you've got you have
this-
some artwork that shows.
yeah, this is not mine, I didn't do it. It was an artist, he was from my hometown, and he and his family left for Palestine in the early 30s. And he did it from his memory. And she was at the Smithsonian Institute that you saw his works, or was it in Chicago?
Yeah, you're asking your daughter who's
Yeah,
present.
yeah, I am asking my daughter because she was very excited that she saw his works there.
So was it like a one-family house?
It was like one family house with a broken roof. If you wanted to go to the attic, you had to go through the roof. And the roof was broken, so you took your life in your hand to go to the attic. But it was considering very adequate then for us. We didn't have to pay rent.
Was it one story or two stories?
One story.
And did it have more than one room?
No, we had 2 rooms. Yeah, 2 rooms. At one time, my brother had to come to live with us, with his wife and children, and child then. It was because he married, I think, in 35. Can't remember. Yeah, about this time.
When you had to flee your home, could you take any of your possessions that you had left with you?
They wouldn't let us, the Poles, because the Poles were there. They wouldn't let us. And we went to my brothers, you know, whatever we could, so we shared.
How did you manage to get any food or money or whatever?
This was a good question. It was very hard. It was very hard. At that time, I don't know where I learned it, to make paper bags, brown bags, by hand. I used to cut them up and different sizes. And I used to do it so fast, and then my mother would go and sell this to the stores so they could put groceries in it. And they were even, you know, how to say, to make, I would have to show it. Small cones
Cones.
out of paper for the smaller. And this is what I did most of the time, even before the war broke out and during the war.
Were you able to finish your schooling before the war?
Just the no, primary.
Primary. And then what? Then what did you do?
Like I said, I tutored. I tutored, and I read a lot. Still do.
But you were earning some money by tutoring at that point.
Yes.
And then you made the bags.
Yeah.
After the war started, was it harder to get food and other goods?
Oh, it was terrible to get food. It was terrible. We used to go and take our lives in our hands to go to the villages and barter whatever we could. And some of the villages came into town. But then when the ghetto was, when they established the ghetto, it was even worse then, because you couldn't get out. And whoever, you know, from the villages who wanted to risk their lives, so they came in. And that's when I told you about my friend, that she came quite a few times. She bought me something. She didn't even want to get paid for it. Yeah.
Was that the only person who was kind to you?
Yeah. That was the only one. Because most of the others, they were so greedy. So greedy. They couldn't wait for the Jews to get out so they could lay their hands on.
When you were ordered into the ghetto, where was the ghetto? Was it right in the middle of your town, or?
It was there was a very small stream, and the other side of the stream, they established it to be the ghetto. There in Kazimierz, there were no fences. It's just here you can live and here you can't. And that was it. The other ghettos, what I was, so there were fences. But this one wasn't fenced in.
Open ghetto.
An open ghetto.
How did they enforce for you to not leave?
The Polish people, they were very, very good at it. Very, very good at it.
How did they do it? With just armed people around the outside?
Yes, they were, and the armed soldiers, German soldiers. But mostly the German soldiers wouldn't be able to tell apart who is Jewish and who is not. But the Polish people, they took care of it.
What kind of a living situation did you have in the ghetto?
In the ghetto, oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was even worse than when I told you later on when we went to my sister. It was just like herring.
One room?
One room. You couldn't have a bed there. No. I remember sleeping in such a folding chair, but I couldn't unfold it because there was no room. So I slept in a fetal position like this. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Were you getting any food there? Were they supplying you food?
It was, everybody was on his own. How you could get some food or you couldn't get some food. That's when the real hunger started, and that's when people were getting sick, very much so. But it's still, the epidemic of the typhus wasn't still yet in full blown until for the end of the 1941, when I was already with my sister and my mother in this room. That's when my brother-in-law got very sick, and he had the typhus. And the Jewish, how would you say, Kehillah? It was not a Kehillah.
Was it a
Unrat, yes. And they established like a hospital. But it was not a hospital. It was, you went there to die because they didn't get any food, they didn't get anything, not a change of linen, no, let alone about medications or anything. And they forcibly took him away to this hospital, and it was another town. And we knew that they took him away there, that he's not going to survive. So I went there. My sister couldn't, she had a baby. My mother couldn't. She was, you know, an older woman, so I said, this is my job. So I went there, I walked all these miles there, and I wanted to get in, they wouldn't let me in. There was the Jewish, you know, commanders or something. So I told them that I had already had typhus, which was a lie, that they should let me in. So I went in and I looked what had happened. I said, the first thing what I have to do is what he asked was water. This was the only thing what he could take. And I went out, and I can't remember where I got it, but I kept bringing him water. And sure enough, he got better. I took him, I rented such a horse and buggy, and I took him home. As soon as he got home, I got sick. I got typhus. My mother said she's not afraid because she had typhus during the First World War. And if you had one time, so you were immune to it. My sister couldn't help herself. She was there, but she didn't get sick. But I was very, very sick. And there was no doctor would come, because this was a ghetto too. But one time, my brother-in-law, I don't know, he got hold of a doctor, of a Polish doctor. And I couldn't understand why. Later on I understood what it was. When he came in the middle of the night, so nobody would see him. He came in, he put a chair in the middle of the room, and he put his coat on. So I thought, what's the matter with him? Why does he have to have his coat on the chair in the middle of the room? Later on it dawned on me, because lice were then so prevalent, and the lice were the carriers of the typhus. So he tried to protect himself. And when he came, he said he doesn't have anything for me.
He just came, but there was nothing.
He just came. Nothing he could do. But my mother and my sister, despite that she had a baby and she never had typhus, they nursed me back to health.
How long did that take?
Oh, I was sick maybe for a month. Yes. And one thing when I couldn't eat, this is no question about it, but when I started getting better, the only thing what I could eat and would eat was a baked potato. A baked potato, and baked in this stove, what I told you, in the ashes. I wish any food would taste so good as this potato did.
And they managed to get potatoes for you.
Yes, my brother-in-law's mother, who lived with us, she used to go out there in the, disguised as an old Polish woman with a thing on her, and buy or barter some things, and she brought back. So she managed. And one time I said, oh, I want sour cream. She went out and got it somewhere. The sour cream for the
Amazing.
potato.
By the way, what was your brother-in-law's name?
Kugel. Kugel. Kugel.
That was the last name.
The last name. Abe.
Abe.
Abush. Yeah.
And what about all those other people living with you? Did they get the typhus too?
When I got sick, so they were afraid. So they moved to another sister's house. But let me tell you, there was so much going on with this typhus that people, whole families, I knew a family lived right, in the neighborhood of us, and they were a father and a mother and 6 children, all died of typhus. All died of typhus. And you could hear every day, he died, they died, they died. And in the midst of it, that I was so sick of typhus, I got a letter from Kuzma, from my hometown. There were still some people left or hiding. I don't know how they got it. And listing who died of typhus. Yeah. And she told me who this one and this one, this one. And she told me about a mother and a daughter. And they had both typhus. And they slept in the same bed, and it was so cold that they cuddled together, and that's how they found them in the morning, both frozen to death in the bed. After the war, a son of this woman the brother of this girl who died with her mother. He, during the war, he ran to Russia. You know, there are a lot of Jews then fled to Russia. And from Russia, right at they were there in Byelorussia, they were sent to Siberia. And he was a communist before the war. And I heard that he lived through the war, and he was so anti-communist, what he lived through there in Russia, that it's unbelievable. After the war, I heard about him.
Could we interrupt just for a moment? Okay.
You've been talking about so many people dying from the typhus.
Well,
How did you deal with the dead people?
with what?
How did you deal with the dead bodies?
With the dead bodies. There was a cemetery. And they took the dead bodies there. Oh, yes.
Going back to the time when the war first started, how long were you able to live in your original home before you had to leave?
Not too long. A few months only. A few months.
Were you able to go ahead with your mother, you know, selling things as she had been and you doing your work to earn money?
I did my work then. My mother was then already getting sick. And, but I was doing, you know, with the children, the Jewish children couldn't go to school. So I had even more work, tutoring. And they paid me who could afford it. Mostly, you know, people, I didn't charge that much. I did the tutoring and I liked it. And the children had something, you know, to keep them occupied. I remember I was tutoring a boy, and his sister was was my age. And she said, "How come that he does your homework? You give him homework, and he never wants to do it for me?" And I said, "This is the way it is." And another one, a boy, he was a lot older and taller, very tall. And he he couldn't read or write Polish because I suppose the parents were very poor. They didn't send him to school. So he used to come at night to my house so nobody would see him. And I used to tutor him and teach him. But then everything, when we left, so everything went away.
Were there other restrictions? You said the children couldn't go to school. What other things were forbidden to the Jews?
Everything was forbidden.
For example?
For example, if a few Jews in the marketplace, they came together, it was forbidden to assemble together. It was forbidden to go to the synagogue. It was forbidden to breathe. Everything was forbidden. And but people did anyways. They came together, discussed things, and political things. Everybody had a different opinion. They did it anyways. if not in the marketplace, so in a room or wherever they could. This was during the ghetto time.
Were you ever betrayed for breaking those laws?
Not then. Not then. Betrayal came a little later.
So at first you were still able to live for a few months in your original home, and you got on by tutoring.
Yeah.
Did you have to wear the yellow star at that point?
Oh, it was not a yellow star. It was a white armband with a blue Magen David, Star of David. This is what we had to wear.
And when did you have to start wearing that?
This almost when the Germans came in. So we would be differentiated from the Poles.
Were you aware of the Poles or the Germans brutalizing people, beating people?
Oh yes, very much so, very much so. When it was commanded that the Jews have to contribute so many people to go to work. What was the work, what they were assigned? Like I said, shoveling snow with the hands, cleaning the parks of leaves, cleaning the streets, and then always the Aufseher, how do you say it, the one who was in charge, who was a Pole, and he would beat. I remember one time that a friend of mine's father was assigned to this, not assigned, they would catch people if somebody wouldn't go voluntarily. So they would catch them wherever they could, or barge into the houses, or when somebody ventured out to such, it was called Zwangsarbeit. It means a work that you had to do, you were compelled to do. And he came home and his hands were all frozen. He never regained the use of his hands because they had to do everything, you know, with their hands, with the snow and sleet and everything. And he was a tinsmith. He could never, he didn't live through, but even then, he couldn't take up his tools anymore. Oh, we saw a lot of things.
Was it only the men that they grabbed?
At the beginning, only the men, but then they caught girls too.
For work?
For work, yes. But they weren't that much brutalized at the beginning as the men did. This was the beginning. I'm talking about 39, end of 39.
Were the girls and the women raped or abused in any way like that?
Not then. No, not then. This came later.
So early on, as you said, you had a few months you could live at home and more or less carry on your lives.
Yes.
Then you had to flee your home.
Could we pause just for a moment, like to the plane?
So was it sometime at the end of 39 when you fled your home?
Yes, we fled home and were there for a few months with my brother. And then in 1940, they liquidated the ghetto in Kazimierz and Kuzmir. And people fled all over, wherever somebody remembered having a distant cousin or a distant relative. So they tried to get there. And like I said, my sister came for us, and we went there later. My brother, his wife, and boy joined us because they couldn't stay there. This ghetto was liquidated. They joined us there, and my brother worked with my brother-in-law. They were very, very good tailors. And the Polish people from around used to come to have them sew for them at the risk of their lives. And they brought food for it. And this was already 41. And I remember we had to shutter the windows because it was looking out on the assembly place. And the soldiers, the German soldiers, were assembled, and through the loudspeaker, through the megaphone, we could hear the pep talk. They were going then to attack Russia. The pep talk. And we, through the shutters, there was, little splits. And I could look out and hear and see them. That's when they started with the war on Russia. This was in 41, it was in the summer 41.
Had any people been sent off to concentration camps?
Not yet that I knew. Not yet. But then it came, this was summer 41, and they started liquidating the ghetto there too. Why I forgot the name of this little village, I don't know. It will come back to me later on, but I just can't right now put the name on it. And when they started liquidating this ghetto, so my sister and her husband had a sister in Demblin, this I remember very well. This was a larger town, and she lived there with her husband. So my sister, her husband and baby went there. Everything on foot, everything, taking life in your hands. Not being able to carry anything, just this what you could carry in your hand. They went there. My brother and his wife and my mother and I were trying to get there too. And we went and we got there. But on the way, we got separated. There was bombing, we got separated. I stayed with my mother. Before we went into this Demblin, it was a bridge dividing Demblin with a different kind of village. And we were on the other side. And we hid during the day it was wheat, it was so high ready to be harvested, that we could hide into it without being seen. Later on, I found out that many other people hid there. So we hid there, my mother and I. I didn't know where my brother was. And we didn't know, it was hot, we didn't have water, we didn't have food, we didn't have anything. And all of a sudden, I saw a column of girls walking by on the road. And I could recognize that these were Jewish girls. I ran out to them from hiding, told my mother still to stay put. And I asked them, where are they going? So they said to walk. Can we join you? And I told him, I am, and I have my mother. You can join, but not your mother. Because they were all young girls. It would be suspicious. So I said, I cannot leave my mother here. And the one who was in charge of the girls, he was too a Jew. And he said, you know what, on the way back, this was in the morning, on the way back we will go back here and maybe we can arrange something. All right. They gave me some water, I took it back to my mother. And we stayed there the whole day, it was so hot. We stayed there on the way home, I saw them. So I took my mother, we went out, and they told me that they are going to have to go through the bridge. And on both sides of the bridge, German guards. But they have a wagon that takes them through the bridge. We hid my mother in the wagon, and all the girls sat around. I didn't have, you had to have a number pinned on. It was a disc and a number that you belong to this and this camp. So we sat around. I tried to hide myself so I wouldn't be conspicuous, but my mother, we covered all up. We went by, the guard didn't stop us, not from this side and not from the other side. So an obstacle was, and they showed us where the ghetto is in Demblin. We went to the ghetto, and there I caught up with my sister-in-law, and she said they took my brother, she doesn't know where. And in the ghetto, it's the same thing, I didn't have where to live. And somebody showed us, a shed. It was in the court. And they told us that the night before there was a raid on the shed, and whoever was there was taken away and shot. But we didn't have where to go, so we went to the shed. We stayed there in the shed for a few days, and we were frantic to know where my brother is. So I said, it's only I who can go, because I have a very good command of the Polish language, didn't look Jewish, I took off my armband and I heard that somewhere there was a big ghetto, Kozhenice it was called. And that somebody has seen him there. So I went out and I walked. I can't remember how many miles. I can't even remember. And snuck into this ghetto. I had to sneak in. What I saw there, till then I haven't seen it. Children with distended stomachs, arms and legs like twigs from hunger. There it was a bigger ghetto. And I came from the small town, from the outskirts, and I didn't see that kind of things till then. I couldn't find my body. And I went back, again snuck out. I went back home. I couldn't find him. Later on, he showed up somewhere. And he came. He said he snuck away from this ghetto, and he came back.
So they had captured him and taken him to a different ghetto? Do you know why?
Because he was a Jew. Only this. Only this.
But wasn't he already in the ghetto?
He was in this ghetto in Demblin, but not in the Kozhenice. They took him to Kozhenice, and somehow he got out. And he came back to Demblin to us. And then in 41, they came and they liquidated the ghetto in Demblin.
When they liquidate the ghetto, what happens?
What happened? They came in. Oh, I have to have a drink. Mostly Gestapo who took of it, and the Sonderkommando. They came in and took up positions all around the ghetto, so nobody could flee. And with loudspeakers, they were going around and announcing, all Jews have to go there and there, to the Umschlagplatz it was called. It was the square, and all the Jews have to go there. And they liquidate the ghetto.
Where were the Jews supposed to be sent?
They didn't tell us where to go. But everybody knew that this wasn't going to be, going to another town to settle like they said. We are going to, they called it resettlement, but it wasn't a resettlement. We knew it because the people who went before, nobody came back. And rumors started going around that these people go by cattle wagon, and nobody came back. And these were just rumors. So people started running wherever they could. In the process of running, almost 90% got caught and shot. It was then in the process of running before my brother and my brother-in-law were taken to a Polish village. They knew them, these Polish people. And they had a machine there, and they had fabric for them to sew. And they said, you'll be able to stay with us as long as you can. But what turned it out? They sewed for them whatever they had, and later on, and I have it documented in the book, they took them and surrendered them to the Nazis, both of them.
After they used up their usefulness.
After they used up their usefulness. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law, with the boy and I, we stayed still in the ghetto while they were working there.
How did you manage in the ghetto? How did you get food?
It was tough. It was very, very tough. There was self-help. You know, people organized committees. And wherever somebody, soup kitchens, something like this, it was never, never enough food. Never, never.
What did you do all day long? Were you assigned a job of any sort?
While I was in the Demblin ghetto, I hired myself out to go instead of the people who were in the ghetto, people native of there. They had to go on a contingent, like I said, to go to work for the Germans. And they then, I didn't know then that they already had established a camp. So instead of going, what every family had to supply, so many, you know, working days, so instead they didn't want to go to work, so they hired out somebody else to say that I am there and I came to work. And that's when I did this.
What kind of work were you doing?
In the fields, you know, hoeing potatoes, weeding, and then later on it was on the Flugplatz. Flugplatz is the field where the landing strip. So there, because the landing strip wasn't like it's here paved, it was sod. It was, and whenever an airplane landed, there was a hole, so we had to repair the holes. So this was going on until he came. We were there in this, living in this shed until 1942.
Was your mother having to work also?
No.
No.
No, she couldn't. She wouldn't be able to, and they wouldn't accept her.
Too old.
No.
So you had to earn for both of you?
Yeah.
When you worked in the fields, were you able to steal potatoes now and then?
Stole potatoes, cabbage, carrots, whatever, you know, could.
Were you searched?
Not going into the ghetto, but later on I paid for it. And in 1942, it was between, in the time, New Year and Yom Kippur. That's when they staged raids and everybody. I was then, it was the morning when they came with the loudspeakers. Every Jew has to report to the Umschlagplatz. Meanwhile, a girl who used to come to the perimeter of the ghetto and used to bring, you know, food to Barte. And she knew me. So she said, you know what? I will find for you a hiding place. But there still was, yes, my sister-in-law was then with her little boy. They were in another, you know, a cousin, a distant cousin or something. They were living there. And my mother and I were in the shed. And she came and she said that I can hide you, but not your mother. Again, the same thing. Meanwhile, the court where the shed was, there was a family living, and they were very nice people. They took care of my mother like it would be, because they lost their mother before, when it was in 41, the Aussiedlung. So they took very good care of her. So when I went away to work, so they took care. And this morning, they said to me, you go with her, and we will all, they had a trapdoor into a cellar, and we will hide there, and your mother's going to be with us. I said, all right. They went into this trapdoor. I was even the one who closed the trapdoor from the outside. And I went with the girl. When we came out in the street, she looked around and she got scared. There were so many Gestapos, so many Germans. So she said, I'm scared. I didn't have any documents, I didn't have anything. So she said, no. And she turned around and left me. She was scared for her, you know, I could understand it in the one hand, but on the other hand, so I went back. And I went back, nobody was there anymore. Nobody was down. At the same time, you know, this is what I went out with her. And we went there to a few streets. It didn't take long. Nobody was there. Not the family what lived there, not my mother. And started towards evening, started to coming, and I sat down. Other people who were just like me, straight somewhere, and they came back. A brother of this family who was there, his wife was there downstairs, but she was gone. Children were gone. And there came other people, and we started thinking, it was getting dark, where should we go? Nobody had any idea, and then one came up with an idea. He has out Polish friends that he thinks we will be able to hide. We started looking for the Polish friends, we couldn't find them. And all the time, you heard shots. All the time. They were straight, you know, people who just went out like we did. And they got caught and got shot. We got into a, so one said, let's go in there. It was a storefront, and it had a trapdoor up into the cellar. No, this is not a cellar.
The ceiling.
The ceiling. So there were maybe 4 of us. We went up the steps and we pulled up the ladder. This was a ladder up there, and we closed. And we stayed there and we saw the whole parade of the people who were captured the day before. And they were marching them to the wagons. And we saw this everything through the they were marching, and we saw many people we knew, and we were sitting there. And then again, we heard somebody downstairs, but nobody came up there. We stayed there overnight. And we didn't have any food, we didn't have any water or anything. We didn't even know where we are. Just one of them knew that there was the storefront. So we decided to split up. Because in a group, it was more dangerous. We split up, and I thought I will go. I didn't, like I said, I didn't look Jewish. I didn't have the Jewish nose or the coloration. And I spoke very well Polish, that maybe I will get away with it, that I will go to the station, to the train station, and I will get lost. I will get on a train, and I will go to a big city, and there I might get easier lost. Walking through, I myself, walking through some street there that would lead me to the train station. I had to ask these people where it was because I didn't know. All of a sudden I heard, Jude, Jude, Jude. I look around, a little boy, he was maybe 9 or 10 years old. He knew me because he used to come to the ghetto walls, to the periphery, and sell, bring food and sell barte. And he started pointing to me, Jude, 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 Jude. And all of a sudden, everybody, there were so many people, everybody was surrounding me and looking, you know, Jude, Jude, Jude. And one looks at the other, they didn't know which one. He was pointing from afar. Which one was the Jude? So I ducked into how can I explain it? In Poland, they built the houses with in between. Here is a carport, and there it was a true way. You could go from one street to the other. So I ducked into this true way, looked around. Nobody was pursuing me. I went to the other side out and I proceeded to go to the train station. I heard that on the train station there was a unit of Jewish workers who worked there at the tracks. I came, but I wasn't aiming to go to them. I just wanted to go on a train. When I came close, one of the workers recognized me. He was a friend of my brother's. He was so glad to see me, that I am alive, that he came up to me. He had a white, band. I didn't have any. And he started talking to me, and all of a sudden, the Ukrainian, this is a different chapter, police, they were dressed in black, and they surrounded me. And he went away to his unit and asked for documents. I didn't have any. Now, were you there? No. So where do you have the documents? I didn't have. Come on with me. My sister, before we split up, I would think, she gave me a ring, and I wore this ring. I had very little money, very little. And they started taking me the commanded tour. I was already out of the city then. So they started walking me back to the city, to the Gestapo headquarters. I asked them, where do you take me? To the Gestapo. So then everything, went through my head. I said, I have nothing to lose. I lashed out at them with my tongue. I have never heard myself talking like this. I told them, listen, you are now working for Hitler. They talk Polish because they were, Ukrainian, but they were living in Polish Ukraine. So I said, Hitler's not going to win the war. I said, it doesn't matter to me if you take me to the German, to the Gestapo or not. I just wanted you to know that your sisters and your wives and your mothers are going to wind up just like I. And the same is going to happen to you. And remember what I am telling you. It doesn't matter to me. My whole family is gone, so it doesn't matter to me if I live or not. But I want you to think about it. I said, I can give you only one thing. I said, I have my ring. If you want to take it, you can take it and let me go. If you don't want to, it's up to you. No, I was really resigned. They didn't answer me anything. But seemingly it got to them. Nobody was on the road, just the three of us. I was between both of them, and we walked. And then one said, go forward. So I was sure that they are going to send, and shot me in the back. But apparently they talked it over. They took the ring and they said, go ahead. I said, where should I go? They said, there is a camp there for Jews. Go ahead and don't show yourself here again, because we will get into trouble. They took the ring. I don't know how they divided it between themselves, one ring. But they showed me the way to go. And then it began another odyssey.
You want to have a break now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,